Welcome back to the Tech Startup Network podcast. Joining me today is Dakota Labine, the Director of Engineering at ThinkOrbital, where he leads multidisciplinary teams building next-generation space infrastructure and advanced X-ray technologies. Dakota, welcome to the show.
Hello, welcome. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you here. I'd love to have you start off by sharing with our listeners more about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, like you mentioned, the director of engineering at ThinkOrbital. Um, I'm trying to lead the team on the technical front, really robust kind of our engineering and guide the team, help make sure through all the products that we're working on, everything's kind of aligned, trying to find overlap and efficiencies and really help guide the team as we grow and expand to go from the startup. It's just a couple people in a room doing a thing to like, okay, no, we need to be documented and have some sort of process to get us moving. And before I got transitioned to the director of engineering, I managed our AI&T group, so building, testing, and integrating all of our spacecraft payloads from the start of the company to just the other day, I was out in LA integrating one of our payloads to our next launch. So
Mhm.
kind of touched everything. Really happy that I get to bring the touched hardware, tested hardware, built hardware experience to the engineering side so we can catch problems that occur in AI&T before they even get to AI&T.
Definitely. And for our listeners who haven't heard of Think Orbital yet, could you share what you all are building?
Yes, we're doing a lot, kind of broad spectrum, but we started with trying to tackle the problem of space infrastructure and really trying to tackle the problem of how do you do large space infrastructure. Everything right now is kind of built on Earth, crammed into a rocket fairing, and then deployed into space and operated kind of in the space environment. You can have fancy things like James Webb's where you go and you deploy and you kind of get bigger, but you're kind of constrained to the volumetric constraints of whatever your launch vehicle has. We have companies kind of pushing the boundaries of what you can put into space with larger launch vehicles, but you're still fairly constrained and you'll always be constrained to the amount of volume that you can actually get to space. The way we want to approach that is think like IKEA flat packing a spacecraft. So rather than having a big spacecraft built and then launching it, we would pack everything small and then go and assemble in space. Um, we always like to talk like you wouldn't build the Empire State Building in New Jersey and then put it on a truck and ship it to New York. You would build it in New York. So that's kind of where we see the space economy needs to evolve is to building in space.
Mhm.
Um, we've evolved into doing a couple other things, which I think we'll dive into a little bit more, but we've evolved into doing what we call space to space X-ray inspection. So one spacecraft shooting X-rays at another spacecraft and receiving those, gathering an image, and anything in between. You can kind of get some insight into what's inside, and then more evolution we'll dive into hopefully, but then doing the same kind of thing on drones. So started as a
Oh,
space
wow.
infrastructure, transitioned to doing X-rays in space, and then transitioned to also doing X-rays on drones.
Yeah, and it's very cool to think about how you've expanded throughout that time, and especially with drones, since drone dominance is so huge right now. So it seems like it's a great opportunity for you all.
Yeah, completely. We're
Yeah.
taking advantage of that.
Yeah. And so for you personally, what made you want to join Think Orbital, and if there was like a specific problem or opportunity that really excited you?
Yeah, I'd say a couple of things. A little bit of old job I started at. It was a startup, got procured by a bigger company, and things kind of got killed by process. And what I enjoyed about when I started was I really saw how far you could push the industry, how far I could push myself, and how far you could take technology and kind of push the aerospace like expectation when you get to be small and scrappy like a startup. So I really wanted to
Mhm.
join another company that was doing that. I started at maybe employee like 250 at my last company, and here at ThinkOrbital, I was employee like seven. So really
Wow.
got to dive in and have a lot of ownership. And that's something that really intrigued me was this idea of coming in and owning all of AI&T. It wasn't a team. It wasn't under somebody. It was, nope, it's your responsibility. You get to own that.
Mhm.
I also had a kind of family relationship with our CEO, retired Colonel Lee Rosen, and he's one that I respect him a lot. He's one that if you see him run to something, you run with him because something really cool is about to happen. So we were having a family dinner one night, and he was just talking about his new cool company, ThinkOrbital, that he's working at. And um, I had a lot of alignment with the mission, kind of building this large space infrastructure, which I think is important. I'm a space nerd myself, so the ability to um, live in space is definitely something we need to get to, and the kind of way that Lee was talking about ThinkOrbital is going to get us there really aligned with what I thought needed to happen. And yeah, I think I was most excited about just the amount of ownership that I knew I could get. And, it really got into one of those like, yeah, this company seems like they're doing cool things. And if I had to bet on anybody to make this work, like I'll bet on myself. So here's an opportunity that Dakota, you can go and try to change the aerospace industry through this company that is trying to change the aerospace company
Yeah, I
or
love that.
aerospace industry. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. And really interesting that you mentioned how at your last company that you were working at, you were employee number 250, and now I think Orbital, you're employee 7. And so I imagine that there were so many differences that came just from being at a company of it such a different size. And so I'm curious to hear what that was like.
Yeah, it was fun. There was, you complain at jobs with process that there's too much process, and you join a company with no process, and you're like, oh, maybe some process is good. So there's definitely a lot of learning in that. And really, I'm used to, I'm working on a program that's a part of a company of programs. And now it's like we're
Mhm.
working on a program, and you are owning one sole portion of it. So a lot of autonomy in the role, which was enjoyed but hard at times. Of what's the point of, hey, this decision is impactful enough, we should all sit down and chat, versus like this decision is yours solely. Like nobody really cares what connector we pick; they just want you to pick one and move on to the next thing. So that
Mhm.
was very interesting to try to learn the difference between when to come to the team and when to just do it by yourself.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And now, as you alluded to earlier, ThinkOrbital has expanded with its product and offerings. And so you're focusing on space infrastructure and, of course, the X-ray imaging. And so, how did the company come about to expand those offerings? If there are certain situations that arose throughout the world or anything like that, that really kind of nudged that idea in the forefront.
Yeah, totally. It happened kind of like a couple paths all converging at once, where through our welding technology, we utilize electron beam welding. And with electron beam welding, you can weld material, you can cut material, you can 3D print if you bring like a filler and do additive manufacturing. And then one of the other fun byproducts is if you shoot an electron beam source at tungsten, you generate X-rays. So we kind of already knew about that. We weren't taking full advantage of it, but we kind of sat and were starting to think like, okay, I'm going to build large structures that people are going to live in and be pressurized. And we want to make sure our welds are quality if they're happening in the space environment. And it's really cool. We have our own means to go and inspect those. So we can X-ray inspect our own welds with our welder itself, which is great. And then it started to evolve into like, well, what else could we X-ray then? We
Mhm.
started to play with a little bit and evolved into saying that like not only could you see the welds, but you could see beyond the welds, we like to say. So we could see, maybe the circuit boards that were behind the panel that we welded or such. And then it got into what sort of anomaly resolution can you do with that? What sort of investigation can you do with X-ray? Now, I'm no longer looking at the outside of a thing. I'm looking inside of a thing, and that really started to change what was happening in our thought process behind who we are as a company and what we want to do. In parallel, we had two successful flight missions kind of demoing all of the space welding and side products that occurred. And then weirdly, we didn't really win any more proposals on like space infrastructure or the ISAM and space servicing, assembly, manufacturing. So as a company, you have to go where attention is. And we kind of put
Mhm.
the X-ray technology out there and started to get a lot of attention, and even won a couple of proposals off of it. So we not only were already thinking about it, but then the industry itself kind of presented that you need to make this pivot. Right now, there wasn't a ton of traction on space infrastructure, and guess what? There's a ton of traction on the X-ray side. Then the drone evolution really came from like, well, one, we need to test terrestrially, so I can't go and do X-rays in space tomorrow, and I want to test my technology. So how can we do that? And we were kind of doing it in a safe lab setup, and then started to think about like, how do we do that more dynamically? And putting it on a drone might be a good way to do that. And then a lot of traction too, just from partners and different investors and people we brought in that were like, I could see an application for doing X-rays on drones. I can see an application for doing X-rays on drones. And then the third path I think that kind of popped in there was the Russian-Ukrainian war. I think we are learning that the next battlefront is a drone battlefront, and whether we like it or not, that's what it is. So if you can find technologies that play into that, like it's a way for us to advance our technology, but it's also a way, I think, for us to really emphasize on the defense side of selling products to like, we exclusively want to go and sell ThinkX as a means to go and fly drones, get more information, and just make everything safer, get people out of the loop. I think pros and cons of drones, right, is like people are out of the loop. There's other cons, unfortunately, to it, but if we can utilize our X-ray technology on drones, we're making things even safer, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that
Yeah.
pivot story, and especially what you mentioned about the idea of going where the attention is. I think that's a really good
Yes.
reminder for any startup, is like just remembering that as you need to pivot, where it might not necessarily be the product that has something quote
Yeah.
unquote wrong with it, but just maybe the application or how it's being used.
Yeah, exactly. Or even the time. I think for us, like space infrastructure has to happen. At some point, we need to utilize the space environment, and we need to get there, and we need to do it safely, and we need to do it at scale. We can sit and debate for hours if that's today or in 10 years, but it has to happen. So we don't want to get rid of it, but we're recognizing the industry wasn't necessarily there to support it. So it's
Mhm.
still our passion and something we want to get back to, but you follow the industry. We got to keep the lights on.
Definitely. And that's something I'd like to dive into further, which is you mentioned like we have to think about the space environment right now. Could you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I'm very happy with the space environment right now. I'm also a little saddened by I joined for space infrastructure at ThinkOrbital, and it's something that I'm personally really passionate about. So a little
Mhm.
sad it's not getting as much attention as I think it deserves, but in general, the whole space economy is just blooming right now. I every day open space news and learn about some new company doing some new space thing. I'm like, I hadn't even considered that that's something we should be doing. That makes a lot of sense. And at least here in Boulder, if you throw a football field in any direction, you'll land on another aerospace startup, and they're doing something really cool. So I'm really excited. I think it's bringing a lot of new ideas to the space economy, and it's also really forcing the kind of approach to space to evolve to be one of um, move quick and challenge the norms. We did this 20, 30, 40 years ago for X reason, and now is that valid anymore? How can we
Mhm.
change that? What can we do? How can we take advantage of the stuff that's already out there? And to me, what it's coming to is like, nobody's doing these super big, expensive projects anymore. Everybody's doing very
Mhm.
cost efficient missions and projects and payloads and science that's only going to help everybody. And if we can do that cheaper, then it's much easier to evolve everything that we're trying to do, our technology and our science and our presence in space. So I'm super excited for what's to come.
Definitely. And with Think Orbital, it's very unique that you work with both commercial and government customers. And so, what are the differences that you see between the two, and how do you balance both of them?
Yeah, I think the big difference is commercial customers are usually like, how does this make money? How does this reduce costs? How does this create a competitive advantage? And governments, you have more like, how does this improve capabilities, resilience, national interest, and yeah. So those are what I kind of think are the big differences. And what we do to balance is making sure technology kind of plays into both.
Mhm.
It's not only just giving these advantages to our government customers, but it's also finding advantages to our commercial customers and how that can benefit them. One example we like to say is like with Think Platform, our big space soccer ball, we like to call it, big space volume, is on the commercial side. It's let's think about how we can use 4,000 cubic meters of volume efficiently. That could be for manufacturing processes that are much more efficient to happen in space in a microgravity environment. That could be
Mhm.
science research. That could be pharmaceuticals. That could just be human presence. And then, on the government side, it's starting to think about things like asset storage, right? We're forward basing in every other branch of the military, but in space we aren't. We put assets up there, and if they break, if they die, we have to go launch another mission to go and resupply them. But
Mhm.
you can imagine platform being a forward basing storage hub where I could just deploy X, Y, and Z whenever I needed to, and it's already in the space environment. So it's really finding applications in all of our technologies that play to both sides. And I think everything that we're trying to do kind of has dual applications with both commercial and government. So we don't design specifically to meet that need, but we try to find those needs where they are and really play into them, and try not to waste effort too. Of like, this could maybe satisfy the commercial market a little bit. And it's like, well, unless it's a lot of it, like just don't give it attention. Move on to the next thing, find another application, but try to balance having our applications overlap as much as we can.
Yeah, and the dual use piece is interesting. I actually had interviewed a prior guest who's a co-founder in a defense tech company, and he mentioned that they started with defense because it's easier to then scale and cross it over to commercial. And I'm curious if you're seeing like something similar where you're doing both commercial and government dually because of that. It makes it easier to apply to both situations.
Yeah, totally. And there's even proposal efforts that are kind of government backed to help you evolve technology. And then once that
Mhm.
kind of R&D, NRE, whatever you want to call it, money is kind of spent to develop the technology, then that means on the commercial end, then they're not eating the cost of what it was to develop the technology. And it benefits our government. And then it also benefits us as a company that our technology's evolved to the point where we can sell it commercially at a much more approachable rate, maybe.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And as you continue to support the growth of ThinkOrbital, what's the hardest part of scaling a deep tech hardware company that most people don't always see or know about?
Yeah, I think it's balancing conviction with humility. Having enough conviction to spend years pursuing something that doesn't exist yet. If you don't believe in the vision, you'll never survive the setbacks.
Hmm.
But also having enough humility to listen when the market tells you when you're wrong. And that's really the core of what I had already talked about in us as a company, is that pivot to like, I I'm passionate about this. I definitely know there's a market there. I know there's a very big market. I know it will happen, but I can sit here and fight for that to happen and let the company die, or we can pivot and find other ways to let the company survive that enable the rest of what we want to do. And you know, balancing that roadmap of, I thought X, Y, and Z was going to happen this year, and unfortunately it didn't, but these other things did. And
Hmm.
in there, I learned tons of lessons that can feed back into my core kind of mission as a company in the products and the things that I want to do. So yeah, really kind of sitting with what you want to do and what needs to happen, and being humble enough to just admit that like your idea is great, but maybe it's not great today, and you need to move to something that's great today so that you can
Hmm.
do your great idea tomorrow.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And for anyone who's listening to this episode who's interested in working for a deep tech company, like what have you learned throughout your career or advice that you would give to someone else?
Be nimble. I think be nimble, be adaptable, and try to really think about what you're doing and how you respond. Again, playing into that pivot, like I never expected that I would, with generating x-rays, like we need a radiation safety officer. We need somebody who is keeping everybody safe from radiation of x-rays. I never expected this guy to become a radiation safety officer, and I am. And like it's great. It's expanded my knowledge base, and it's changed how I approach problems. I never expected to have to learn how to fly a drone, and I did. I never expected that I would generate X-rays while flying a drone, and how do you do that safely? And here I am, and it's taught me so many lessons and really kept the company alive. So just again, being adaptive and nimble and just willing to jump on whatever problem needs to be jumped on to solve to get to the next phase is probably 90% of my job.
Yeah, it's like the what is that phrase? Like the only constant is change. It's like some you can always
Yes.
kind of expect change in this role.
Yeah, exactly.
And one thing that you mentioned briefly earlier that I'd like to go back to is that you said that in Boulder specifically, like there's so many space companies that are popping up because the space industry is booming right now. And so I'd love to hear more about your perspective on that, about why space is so important, why people are prioritizing it, and what's happening right now.
Yeah, I think there's lots of money going there. I think you have companies like SpaceX and Starlink really showing, yes, it is a major investment to do infrastructure in space, but look what it has enabled.
Mhm.
You know, we have almost global internet for anybody with the right means to do it. We show that as you advance technology and build at scale, cost goes down. And I think you're also seeing this approach of like, I want to go and build this X satellite that's supposed to be in space for 20 years and has to work continuously with no issues because I need to do surveillance or weather monitoring, that those are completely fine and valid. And those also followed kind of a more cost hungry launch approach, i.e. very expensive rockets to get to space. And now the cost to get to space has gone down so much that
Mhm.
it's very effective to go and put something in space and test it. And I think what we're seeing too is, like I mentioned with Starlink, but in other products, that when you develop something for space, it doesn't just go to space and live there to do a thing. It helps us evolve down here on Earth to get faster internet, better advancement in technology and science, and I could go launch a couple CubeSat weather monitoring spacecrafts for a quarter of the price of an older weather satellite, and I can get data very quickly and operational. And maybe it only lasts 2 years, but in those 2 years, I can go and launch more. So this evolution just put stuff in space very quickly and prove it out, and everybody's kind of competing for that market to make things quicker and cheaper and faster and more efficient. Um, so yeah, I think I went on a rant there, but I think that answered the question.
No, yeah, it's great. And also too, I mean, I've been reading about how more conflicts are going to be happening in space. So I'm curious if that is something that has impacted Think Orbital's work as well.
Yeah, totally. I think we monitor and track everything that's in orbit, right?
Hmm.
And we do that for multiple reasons. At the core, we don't want things to run into each other. When you're traveling at 17,500 miles per hour, like collisions are catastrophic and can equate into more impacts and more impacts and wiping out the whole space environment in its entirety. So there's a lot of importance in tracking, but when you want to evolve into understanding what's out there and even understanding past things, you need to kind of have a look inside. So that's where I think we're filling a big hole in the market is we like to say we're the missing piece of SDA, right? I can go and visually look at a spacecraft. I can tell you what I think it is. I can tell you what I think the size is. Maybe if it's some NASA satellite from the 80s, I have some documentation that can tell you a little bit more, but um, it's really unknown on what the impact of that spacecraft is. So we can fill the market and go and tell you what's happening inside of it. And then you can start to build out a better picture of everything on orbit. And for multiple reasons, you can start to assess what you do with that. Like, how do we need to do orbit stuff? Do we need to monitor that satellite that is being a little suspicious? What's happening over there? And having the means to go and look inside is really going to open up a different understanding of the space environment in itself. And then, you go further into we're starting to put stuff out there and maybe it's being anonymous and we want to determine what is going on. Like, again, If you have telemetry, that's awesome. Maybe you can troubleshoot from there. But imagine being able to look inside and see RCS thruster number three's valve is just stuck closed and we can never use it. Like, if you're able to look inside, you can get the answer to those questions, and we can either make a game day decision on what we do with anomalous assets in space and how we react to them.
Hmm. Definitely. And you've shared a few pivots that ThinkOrbital has made and changes that you've had throughout the past few years. But what are some things that you're working on in 2026? If there's anything you can talk about or new developments, would love to hear them.
Yeah, so 2026 has been exciting for us. We a couple weeks ago integrated our third flight mission onto the space vehicle that we're riding on, and that should be launching in the next couple of weeks. Won't say launch date because it'll probably change, so we're just going to say in the next couple of weeks. But that is launching our X-ray detector payload. So in the
Mm.
spacecraft to spacecraft X-ray, there'll always be one spacecraft shooting X-rays and one spacecraft receiving X-rays. So we're doing a first demonstration mission of that happening over the next 12 to 18 months. And that starts with what we call our third flight, the X-ray detector payload being launched into orbit, going along with the ride with the space vehicle provider, and Q1 beginning of 2027, our Flight 4 mission will launch, and that is the X-ray emitter portion of that mission. And those two sometime mid next year will come in close contact with each other and shoot X-rays and receive X-rays and take some pretty images in space. The first intentionally done X-ray images taken in space. So super excited about that. And that really equates to right now we are deep in test and development of our fourth flight payload, getting that system up and running, and in our vacuum chambers, running through all the testing required to get system validation on that.
Mhm.
We are also working through handfuls of proposals. A couple of them are on Think platforms, so it's space infrastructure technology still getting evolved a little slowly, but get some attention. And then on our drone side, we are working towards our first official sale of our ThinkX system to a police department that will be able to utilize our technology to go out and assess threats. A lot of cases of backpacks that may or may not have a bomb in them, and it requires a person to go walk up and assess the situation and put their life in the line. And that's, somebody's mom or dad or brother or sister or uncle or aunt. And if we can use our drones to go and check what's inside, we pull a person out of the loop. And I think everybody's happy with that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So many exciting things. It's like, how do you juggle them all when you have so much happening? I can imagine it can be a little bit overwhelming at times.
Yes, definitely very overwhelming, but we're all here for a reason. We're all here to make the company happen and make our kind of mission and vision statement become true. Um, we're definitely a small team, but we all work pretty hard. We all own our stuff, and if you have the passion for what you're doing, then you have the drive for what you're doing, and drive is what's required to make hard things happen. So everybody, I look around, you can't see, but I look around and I see the whole team just outside this conference room, and they're all working, and I know they're all passionate. And we're always chatting about where the priorities are, where we can overlap. I'm doing
Mhm.
something on product X, and like it overlaps with product Y. So why don't I make sure that it's applicable for both, so that like when we do a lot of things, we can find a lot of overlap. So it doesn't take the same amount of time to do the same task twice. We can do the same task once and benefit both. So lots of juggling, but lots of just getting it done.
Yeah, definitely. And now one of my favorite questions to ask our guests is I'd love to have you give a shout out to someone in tech that you're feeling really inspired by lately. So it could be someone at another startup, it could be a VC, community builder, really anyone is fair game.
That is a great question. I There's so many. Yeah, I want to say Blue Origin, if I'm being honest. I think they've had a very unfortunate event. Obviously, their rocket blew up, and that's never fun to happen. But I think what really drives me is how you kind of respond to failures. And
Hmm.
I think right now the way that I've been seeing them kind of handle the failure and approach it is really inspiring and really pulls you down to, we can sit and blame next situation and like it happened. What are we going to do next to recover from? So I have a couple friends over there and I appreciate the approach that they're taking. And um, you know, failures are very unfortunate, but they're so important to happen. And again, what really matters is how you recover from them. And
Hmm.
we'll see how they recover. But so far, I think what they've been doing is very impressive.
Yeah, well, that's a good shout out. Dakota, this has been such a fun episode, and I've so enjoyed having you on the podcast. And I'd love to have you share with our listeners where they can find you and Think Orbital online in case they'd like to connect.
Yeah, we are thinkoverall.com is website. We're LinkedIn, Instagram, I think the same handle. Um, yeah, we tried to post a lot and try to get that out there. And yeah, it's been great chatting. I really appreciate the opportunity. Always happy to talk shop and talk about what we're doing at the Global. So hopefully I didn't kill with too much just ranting about what we're doing, but appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, no, very cool to hear what you all are doing, and thank you so much again for your time.
Yeah, likewise.